Odysseus survived 10 grueling years of Trojan War, but the journey back to his family would take another 10. Back on his home island of Ithaca, his absence has created a dangerous vacuum. A mob of arrogant, opportunistic suitors has occupied his palace, bleeding his estate dry while relentlessly harassing his wife, Penelope, and his young son, Telemachus. We are looking at a voyage that begins in absolute triumph, a victorious fleet sailing away from the ruins of Troy, completely unaware of the nightmare ahead. The grueling decade of combat was only a prelude. Preserving the fractured family and kingdom he left behind would demand much more of him. The voyage's first serious internal test arrives on the island of the Cyclops. Here, Odysseus has to rely entirely on his intellect to keep his men alive. Trapped inside a cave by a man-eating giant, he devises a brilliant escape. He tells the monster his name is Nobody, blinds him with a sharpened stake while he sleeps, and sneaks his crew out the next morning, tied to the bellies of the giant's sheep. But as they sail away to safety, his ego takes over. Unable to let his masterful trick go unrecognized, he taunts the bleeding giant and shouts his actual name across the water. That single moment of pride carries a devastating cost. The Cyclops prays to his father, the sea god Poseidon, begging him to turn the ocean itself against the man who blinded him. Odysseus outsmarted his enemy, but he couldn't outsmart his own arrogance. His need for glory has turned a straightforward voyage into a cursed, divinely orchestrated gauntlet. With the curse in effect, leadership becomes his next great trial. With the shores of Ithaca literally visible on the horizon, his exhausted crew succumbs to paranoia and opens a mystical bag of captured winds, believing Odysseus is hoarding treasure. The escaping winds physically blow the ship all the way back into the vibrant, unknown depths of the sea, instantly erasing months of progress. This setback forces them to the island of the witch, Circe. Odysseus must navigate her emerald forests and reverse her magical animal transformations to win her over and secure her guidance for the path forward. But Circe's advice sends him into the eerie, luminous underworld. To find his way home, he is forced to seek wisdom from the ghosts of his fallen comrades and confront the dark history he left behind. A leader's brute force cannot solve every problem. True survival requires enough humility to ask for directions, even if it means descending into death itself to find them. As we see in this ancient depiction, the sea presents its next challenge as a psychological test. The Silens do not lure sailors to their deaths with physical violence. Instead, they sing an irresistible promise of ultimate knowledge. Odysseus orders his men to plug their ears with beeswax and tie him securely to the mast. He willingly subjects himself to the overwhelming temptation of their song, but physically removes his ability to yield to it. This victory of self-restraint is immediately followed by a brutal test of sacrifice. He steers his ship between two terrors, the six-headed Scylla and the swirling whirlpool Charybdis, making the agonizing choice to sacrifice a few men to save the rest. His crew, however, fails their own test of restraint. Starving and exhausted, they ignore his strictest orders and slaughter the sacred cattle of the sun god. The divine retaliation is swift. A storm obliterates their ship, leaving Odysseus as the sole survivor. Navigating the sea requires intense discipline. Lacking the self-control to resist immediate desires ultimately costs the crew their lives, and the captain his ship. Shipwrecked and completely alone, Odysseus faces a final, grueling test of patience. The goddess Calypso traps him on her island, a lush, flawless, immortal paradise. Yet surrounded by absolute perfection, Odysseus spends his days weeping on the beach. He longs for the chaotic, aging, mortal reality of his home in Ithaca. After 7 years of this agonizing endurance, the gods finally relent. They order Calypso to let him build a simple wooden raft and sail away. He willingly rejects a flawless, immortal existence. He chooses instead to embrace the pain, the struggle, and the fierce love of the human experience. Odysseus finally steps foot in his palace, but the physical return is only half the battle. To survive the mob of gluttonous suitors, he must disguise himself as a battered, elderly beggar. The tension peaks with a test of strength. Penelope challenges the suitors to string Odysseus's legendary heavy bow, a task each arrogant man attempts and hopelessly fails. Then the disguised beggar steps up to the line. He effortlessly strings the weapon, the string humming, and reveals his true identity. What follows is a fast-paced, shadow-driven retribution. Working alongside his son Telemachus, Odysseus channels 20 years of suffering into a calculated strike, cleansing the house of the men who tried to steal his life. Physically walking through the door was not enough. Reclaiming his home required absolute precision and a terrifying brand of justice. But despite the defeated monsters and the silence in the hall, a fiercely guarded Penelope refuses to blindly accept that this blood-soaked man is actually her husband. She initiates one final emotional trial. She calmly orders her servants to move their marriage bed out of the bedchamber. Odysseus reacts with shock and sudden anger. He demands to know who could possibly cut through the trunk of the living olive tree that he himself used to carve the bedposts. With that secret revealed, Penelope's defenses shatter. She emotionally surrenders, recognizing her husband at last, and the dazzling, chaotic adventures melt into quiet, tearful relief. Odysseus defeated monsters with intelligence, survived the anger of a god, and crossed the world. Everything he endured mattered because it finally brought him home.